Welcome to Young Asia Television.
Presented by the National Science Foundation of Sri Lanka.
Hello and welcome to Mihibandala.
ශීතපතයනම් මන්දාකිනියේ නිල් පැහැයෙන් හැඩවූ එකමුළුවක් ඇත්තේ ගහකොළ මල් සුසැදී පනනල ඇත සුරැකී ජීවිතයේ විතුනන අත්කරගත යුත්තේ අවනි පැයුම් විහිවිය යුත්තේ සොබාදහම් සුරැකිය යුත්තේ අප සම නිරෝගී විය යුත්තේ ජීවිතයේ මේ සියලු රහස් ගැන දැනුවත් විය යුත්තේ විද්‍යාවෙන් තේරුම්ගෙන ලෝකය ජීවත් විය යුත්තේ
Our ancestors worked hard to meet their needs for survival. But today, it has changed drastically as our lifestyles have changed so much. With the advancement of technology, we use machines for practically every single one of our day-to-day tasks. And that's one of the reasons why modern-day society is so filled with ill health. And one of the reasons why diabetes is on the rise. I met up with some of my friends recently and they pointed out that I had lost weight. I didn't actually know why and I told them that. And then they suggested that I check my blood for diabetes. Let's find out more about that.
Diabetes has a long history. It is mentioned in an ancient Egyptian script written in 1550 BC. There are also records that ancient healers in India have referred to this, and they describe this condition as passing urine with sugar. Later, scientists describe this as a condition where one's blood glucose levels rise.
We need energy to lead an active life. And to get energy, we need to have food. The food we eat gets digested and converts into energy for our muscles, helping us lead our day-to-day lives.
Glucose is one of the essential compounds for life. We cannot live without glucose. Particularly if you take the brain takes most of its energy from glucose. So we need to maintain perfect level of glucose to sustain life. We get glucose from several sources. From the carbohydrate food we eat, the ultimate result is glucose that is absorbed after the digestion to the body. Also, when the glucose level is not sufficient, that is when we are fasting, the body produces glucose. This is called gluconeogenesis. Particularly in the liver and to some degree in the muscle. Glucose is produced from the breakdown products of protein, amino acids, and also from the breakdown products of fat. And also the glucose is stored as glycogen in the liver and the muscle. And when we are fasting, the glycogen is broken down to produce glucose so that the body maintains a normal level of glucose to sustain life.
When you eat food that contains carbohydrates, it's broken down in the stomach and digestive system into glucose, which is a type of sugar. We need glucose from food because that's what gives us energy. Carbohydrate-containing foods are things like starchy food, sugary foods, milk and some dairy products, and fruit. The glucose then moves in the bloodstream and the body detects that the blood glucose level is rising. In response to that, the pancreas, which is a little gland that sits just underneath the stomach, starts to release a hormone called insulin. And it's insulin that helps our body get the energy from the food we eat. The bloodstream then takes the glucose and insulin to every cell in our body that needs it. To make this easier to understand, let's look at muscle cells. At the muscle cells, it's insulin that allows the glucose to get into the cells where it can be used for energy. It's a bit like insulin is a key unlocking the door to the cells so that glucose can get in. That way, the blood glucose levels start to drop. But the blood glucose level can be topped up at any point by the liver, releasing extra glucose that it has stored. The blood glucose rises again and again. The pancreas produces more insulin to move with the glucose through the bloodstream to the muscle cells. Open the doors and let the glucose in.
If the glucose level in the body is too low, particularly the brain and other organs won't get enough glucose and we cannot live. At the same time, if the glucose level is high and these high levels are maintained, persist for long periods, we get a lot of other complications. We call this diabetes mellitus.
The body functions best with the blood glucose at an optimum level. It doesn't like if the blood glucose level rises too high. Normally, there is a cycle within the body which balances out the glucose and the insulin level, and this is achieved by the food you eat, the pancreas and the liver. However, in some people, the system doesn't work properly. The two main types of diabetes, type 1 and type 2. In type 1 diabetes, the body isn't making any insulin at all. This is because of an autoimmune response, whereby the body has destroyed the insulin-producing cells in the pancreas. We don't entirely know why that happens in some people and not in others. Type 1 diabetes accounts for about 10% of all cases. It's most often found in the under 40s, and it's by far the most common type of diabetes found in childhood. In type 1 diabetes, the carbohydrate-containing food is broken down into glucose as normal. That glucose then moves into the bloodstream. Normally, the body would produce insulin to let the glucose into the cells. But in type 1 diabetes, there is no insulin being produced, so the glucose can't get into the body cells at all. So, the level of glucose in the blood rises and rises. The body tries to lower the levels of glucose. It tries to get rid of the glucose through the kidneys. That's why people who have undiagnosed type 1 diabetes tend to go to the toilet a lot to pass urine. As the kidneys filter the glucose out of the blood, they also take a lot of water with it. So the person with diabetes will get very thirsty. The urine contains a lot of glucose, and that creates an environment. It's quite easy for bacteria to thrive, so it's also quite common to get thrush or genital itching. In the same way, the blood contains a high level of glucose as well, so more bacteria than usual will tend to breed in flesh wounds, and they might be slow to heal. Glucose can also build up in the lens at the front of the eyes, causing the liquid in the lens to become cloudy. That can mean that some people with undiagnosed type 1 diabetes can have blurred vision. Because the glucose can't get into the cells to be used for energy, somebody who's got undiagnosed type 1 diabetes is going to start feeling very tired, lethargic, and unable to go about their normal daily routine. But the body cells still need an energy source in order to work properly. So what it does, it starts breaking down its fat tools, and that can lead to weight loss. So, the main symptoms of type 1 diabetes are going to the toilet a lot, thirst, thrush or genital itching, slow healing of wounds, blurred vision, tiredness and weight loss. These symptoms generally happen quite quickly over a few weeks and come to be reversed once the diabetes is treated with insulin. Type 2 diabetes accounts for about 90% of all cases in the population.
Diabetes has a tendency to run in families, and this is called the genetic risk. And this is particularly high in the common type of diabetes called the type 2 diabetes. But it is also seen to some extent in the type called the type 1 diabetes, which commonly occurs in children. That is because particularly in the countries where the type 1 diabetes is high, like the Scandinavian countries, it is seen more commonly than in the countries where the type 1 diabetes is less common.
It's most common in the over 40 age group in the white population and in the over 25 age group in the South Asian population. Type 2 diabetes is a little more complex because there are slightly more processes at work. Either the body isn't producing quite enough insulin, or the insulin it is producing isn't working properly. That can be due to being overweight, because a buildup of fat can stop insulin doing its job properly. But it can also happen in people of a healthy weight. So, in type 2 diabetes, the carbohydrate-containing food is broken down into glucose in the stomach and digestive system as normal. That glucose then moves into the bloodstream. The pancreas starts to produce insulin, which moves with the glucose through the bloodstream to all the body cells, which need glucose for energy. However, the glucose can't always get into the cells, because the locks to the cell doors have become furred up with fat deposits. That means that the insulin can't open the cell doors properly, so the level of glucose in the blood continues to rise. In response to this, the pancreas produces even more insulin so that the blood glucose levels continue to rise and the insulin level continues to rise. This situation is further complicated by the cells, which are desperate for energy, sending out emergency signals to the liver to release stored glucose. The blood glucose level goes up and up, and the pancreas produces more and more insulin until it can't cope anymore, and eventually it can wear out. As with type 1 diabetes, the symptoms of type 2 diabetes are going to the toilet a lot, thirst, thrush or genital itching, slow healing of wounds, blurred vision, tiredness and weight loss in some people. The symptoms of type 2 diabetes come along very slowly, and some people don't have any symptoms at all. So, for that reason, people can live with type 2 diabetes for up to 10 years before they realize that they have it. Type 2 diabetes can be treated in a number of ways. Initially, it may be sufficient to make changes to the food you're eating and to take extra physical activity or lose any weight that may be inappropriate. But type 2 diabetes is a progressive condition, and most people will need some form of medication to treat it.
Diabetes is a condition that must be controlled. Failure to do so can lead to other illnesses. So, what are these other illnesses?
Diabetic patients have a tendency to have heart attacks, strokes, and also the blocks in other big blood vessels in the legs and other organs at a younger age, and also more aggressively. The blocks in the blood vessels of the legs, we call this peripheral vascular disease, and this leads to a lot of complications like what we call gangrene, where the blood supply to the leg can get cut off and the part of that leg can die. In addition, there is a tendency among diabetic people to get poor wound healing, and this leads to a lot of complications when they get infections.
2 diabetes can be passed down from generation to generation. Parents or grandparents can easily pass diabetes to their children. However, in a modern context, Even if there are no hereditary traces of diabetes, a person can easily contract the disease.
Diabetes was very rare in the society about 30 years ago. Our ancestors, our grandparents, they didn't have diabetes. That is because they led a very active lifestyle. They didn't use vehicles for transportation. They walked miles and miles per day and also used our energy, physical activity for day-to-day activities. That is why they didn't have diabetes. But over the last 20-30 years, there had been a very rapid change in our lifestyles. These socio-economic and the demographic changes and the lifestyle changes has led to the change of the disease pattern. And the diseases like diabetes, which was not common in our predecessors or ancestors, have become major health problems because of the change in our lifestyles.
Apart from type 1 and 2 diabetes, we also hear of diabetes during pregnancy. Now, is there a difference between type 1 and 2 diabetes and diabetes occurring during pregnancy? Let's find out.
Diabetes in pregnancy is called gestational diabetes. This can lead to a lot of complications to the fetus and the newborn. And also, when you have diabetes during pregnancy, that can lead to a lot of complications to the mother. In fact, what happens is the blood glucose level in the mother is kept elevated from the hormonal changes that occurs during the pregnancy. Particularly the human placental lactogen and other hormones elevates the blood glucose level of the mother. This is because particularly in the good old days, when people did not have too much food all the time, the blood glucose level had to be kept elevated so that the fetus inside the mother gets enough glucose all the time for its growth and energy. But people who have a tendency to get diabetes in the modern society, this level goes up above the normal level. That is what we call the gestational diabetes.
We are sometimes not mindful of our health. We eat anything and don't limit the quantities we eat. Lack of exercise is another issue. We eat and we sleep or are stationary. Thus, glucose builds up in our system and we put on weight. Now, this is one of the main reasons for diabetes. If people knew what other conditions they are prone to because of diabetes, they would eat well, watch the portions they eat, and exercise regularly. So, what are these other conditions that a person with diabetes is prone to? Let's find out.
The complications that occur specifically in diabetes patients are called microvascular complications. This occurs only in people with diabetes because what happens is the capillaries or the small blood vessels in those patients who have elevated blood glucose get diseased. As a result, the blood supply to particularly the retina of the eye and the kidneys, the glomerulus, and also to the nerves get affected. And the problem that we see in the eyes is called retinopathy, and that occurs in kidneys called nephropathy, and that in the nerves neuropathy. This can lead to blindness, kidney failure, and nerve damage. What happens is when the small blood vessels get damaged or disease, the blood supply to the vital organs get affected. And in fact, there are a lot of other compounds that can get liberated or produced, and some of them are called free radicals, which are toxic to the tissues, and also due to the lack of blood supply, various other growth factors also gets liberated, leads to abnormal growth of blood vessels, particularly in the eyes and other tissues. All these lead to the microvascular complications in patients with diabetes.
As a result of diabetes, you can lose your sight. Your nerves get affected. The shape of your legs change. There is a possibility of having your legs amputated. Impotence. Having to use the toilet often. Constipation. Incontinence. Difficulty in passing urine. Kidney failure.
Knowing how to check for diabetes is an all-important step towards the control of it.
There are several tests that are used to detect diabetes as well as to check whether your diabetes is under good control. All these are blood tests.
Tests to determine diabetes. Fasting blood sugar test. Random blood sugar test. Blood test after consuming glucose. HbA1c glycated hemoglobin test.
There is no way to prevent type 1 diabetes, so a person has to continuously be on medication. But type 2 diabetes is quite different.
The type 2 diabetes, which accounts for more than 90% of the people in the world with diabetes, can be prevented. If we live according to our genes, that is, if we eat according to our energy requirements and prevents overweight and obesity, and also if we provide adequate exercise to our body, we can easily prevent type 2 diabetes. Studies have shown that about 50% of people who are even at high risk of getting type 2 diabetes, future diabetes can be prevented by these two simple methods. Particularly when we do exercise, we burn more glucose and also we burn more fat, and the body does not become overweight or obese. And as a result, both the glucose levels comes down as well as our insulin resistance comes down. These are the two main mechanisms by which healthy eating and regular physical exercise can prevent the common type of diabetes, that is the type 2 diabetes.
Managing diabetes is quite simple. They can be listed as the control of food, exercise, taking medication, and injecting insulin.
When we control diabetes with diet, we need to control carbohydrates. Particularly high sugary foods has to become reduced. And also we need to take carbohydrate according to the energy needs. And also we can increase particularly green vegetables and healthy fruits, and also take adequate amounts of protein and adequate amount of fat. By a healthy diet, you can control blood glucose levels. Similarly, when we do regular exercise, it helps to burn more glucose and control the glucose levels. In addition, in the longer run, the reduction of insulin resistance due to the exercise will help the insulin levels that is available in the body to act better at tissue level. And this also helps to control the blood glucose levels and diabetes in long term.
There is a common myth among people that certain medications made to control diabetes can actually cause failure of our liver, kidneys, and various other parts of our system. Let's investigate.
Many people think that when you use insulin and tablets to control diabetes, as well as when you take other tablets to control the high blood pressure, cholesterol, they can lead to kidney damage and liver damage. These are complete myths. Diabetes drugs does not cause kidney damage. In fact, they are used to reduce the glucose and save our kidneys and other important organs.
We hope you gained some vital information on diabetes today. Let us remind you on how to prevent and manage diabetes. Watch what you consume, exercise and maintain an active life. And of course, maintain your correct weight. Until we meet again, bye-bye.